Hi guys, Kaze here. Welcome back. It's been a while since we've done this, but we're back with a new project. Yakuza Kiss recently came out on the Steam store for $9.99. Of course, a lovely Otome novel. Well, dark, but lovely. It came out, what, June 19th, and is currently going for like $9.99. There's only one route with, where is it? This guy right here with a nice lovely tattoo, and then this is our main character right here. As you can tell, the dark crime being the Yakuza. This game has elements from Western romance novels, Asian TV dramas, so you can expect to find romance, erotica, action, and crime. So I hope you guys enjoy this. There will be more chapters coming out at a later date as they're available, and as they come out we'll do some more videos as well, and as time goes on the price will go up. The game is currently in early access, but you can definitely check it out in the Steam store. I'll put the link to that down in the description below. Of course, if I forget it, yell at me in the comments. It's totally fine to do that, I don't mind. So let's get started with this lovely game. Chapter 1. When you're in hell, only a devil can point the way out. Looks like a little bit of blood. Somewhere far away, a storm was raging. The distant rain and rolling thunder seemed to drown out everything else. The never-ending hum of the city, the violence and cruelty of the underworld, none of it could reach this dark sanctuary. For a moment, she caught the scent of the rain in the air and she inhaled deeply. She felt strangely calm, a part of her unsure if she was awake or dreaming. Her hair was still wet from the shower she had taken earlier. Water droplets slowly trickled down her body, but tactile sensation broke the dreamy haze and she shivered in the cool air. The room was pitch black, but she knew he was there. A flash of lightning illuminated everything in blue, and for an instant she saw him there, standing still, watching her. When it was dark again, she heard him approach. She felt fingers wrap around her wrist, and she was gently pulled towards him. At first, her body stiffened at his touch, but as his lips brushed against her ear and he softly whispered her name, hesitation melted away. She yearned for warmth, and the heat radiating from his skin drew her closer to him. She relaxed, easing against his chest. In that moment, with him, listening to his racing heartbeat, she felt safe and protected from the world outside. Those few seconds of calm brought a contented smile to her face, but when she opened her eyes again, she saw nothing except darkness. Her happiness faded and fear bloomed in her heart. She was aware this moment would soon be over. It would all be over. At the thought, numbing sadness washed over her. She let a shuddering sigh and tried to nestle into him. Tendrils of dread gripped tightly around her throat, making it hard to breathe. She felt his fingers thread into the silk of her wet hair, and she closed her eyes. Her mind went silent, and her breath steadied. When she opened her eyes again, it was the only thing she could see, hear, and feel. The sultry tone of his voice as he whispered her name in the darkness. The warmth and strength of the hands wrapping around her, possessing her completely. The feel of his mouth on her, burning her, consuming her with each deepening caress. She let go, slowly coming apart in his embrace. It's a really big tattoo. But dang. 2 months earlier. A young woman was packing groceries into a plastic bag. Ashen skin and the dark circles around her eyes made her appear sickly, but her movements were quick and precise. When she finished with her task, she looked up at the elderly man standing in front of the store counter. "That'll be $3.25, sir." The total was projected above the counter surface in neon blue letters. The man took out a credit card and swiped it across the projection. The blue letters flashed brighter for a moment and disappeared. As he took the bag and went to leave the store, she gave him a small bow, accompanied by a warm smile. "Thank you. Please come again, sir." The exact same monotonous routine repeated throughout the day as she served every customer with the same robotic efficiency, with a smile on her face, always a perfect blend between submission and human warmth. In some ways, her smile was like a suit of armor. It shielded her from the occasional aggressive customer, whilst at the same time hiding her true self within. It was just one of the many attributes she had picked up during her years in the service trade. She never planned for the retail career to be permanent, but things that just turned out that way. At least, this job paid her bills. Well, some of them. She was lost in thought, staring at the store door. Whenever the stream of customers had an interval, she would walk around the store, restocking the shelves and cleaning the already sparkling floors. This night, business was unusually quiet, and she spent 10 minutes rearranging a pile of instant noodles, aligning the packages in perfect vertical lines. She stepped back to admire her handiwork, but after a while her shoulders slumped, and she let out a deep sigh. Why am I doing this? She turned to look at the small control panel attached to one of the store walls. I could press a button, and the store AI drones would swarm out, stock and clean the store in 30 seconds flat. She leaned down to rub her aching feet for a moment, and then returned to her spot behind the counter. I sometimes forget I'm being paid to stand here and act human. She tried to block out the irritating elevator music drifting from the store speakers. This is definitely not helping my headache. She slumped over the counter, rubbing her throbbing temples with her fingers. The motion offered only temporary relief, and the ever-worsening ache made her slightly queasy. She glanced up to look through the store windows at the littered street outside in an attempt to keep herself occupied. I wish it would stop raining. It's almost time to go home. The thought made her uneasy, and anxiety pulled at her chest. She began to nibble at her lower lip nervously. Just then she noticed her reflection looking back at her from the window glass. For a moment she froze and took in the messy light green hair, the gray eyes, and the vacant stare. She locked eyes. With the reflection she did not like them, I promise. And kept staring back at her, its eyes like empty wells. She felt she was being pulled in when its lips suddenly spread into a grin. Her insides twisted and she hurried to turn away. She accidentally knocked over a container and cheap plastic lighter spilling over the counter. She quickly cleaned the mess up and tried to steady her breathing, the growing anxiety subsiding a little when she heard the hiss of the store door. That's one that door. Her lips autonomously curved into another well-rehearsed smile. The door opened and a young athletic man rushed in. While heading toward the staff back room, he was already tearing off his jacket. He held an ID chip and disappeared through the door before it was opened fully. A moment later, he came back in the storeroom wearing a garish Megamart uniform. He looked around, and when he spotted her, a grin spread across his face. "Jeong, sorry, I'm late again." His fingers ran through disheveled red strands of hair as the happy grin was replaced by a faint, apologetic smile. "Oh, don't worry about it, Joe." She tried her best to reassure him. She didn't mind him being late. She was in no rush to leave. He took her place behind the counter. Jeong went to the back room and changed out of her uniform. When she returned, she saw Cho talking to an irate male customer. Cho held out a credit card. The blurry, pissed-off-looking man grabbed it and stormed out of the store, shouting out a few final insults. She walked over to relieve but visibly annoyed Cho. He was leaning against the counter, trying to calm himself down with a few deep breaths. "Not the best possible way to start your shift." Cho sighed and looked up at her. I guess he didn't know he was out of credit, and for some reason that was my fault. Joe scoffed and returned a pack of vaporettes onto a counter shelf. I wish these people had the capacity to come up with original material. At least let me be entertained when I'm insulted. I know that feeling. She saw the irritation hiding behind his smile. I swear it's always something about my mother or something about my shitty life decisions. And it usually comes from some smelly guy buying beer or porno mags at 4 in the morning. He buried his face in his hands and let a humorless chuckle. Jeong decided it was best to give him wide berth tonight. She walked toward the store exit. Jeong let out another long sigh and looked up at her. That reminds me, I wanted to ask you something. Oh? What's your secret? Jeong stared at him with a confused look on her face. What do you mean? Well, nasty customers and all the other countless perks of this trade never seem to faze you. You always look so calm. He lifted a few fingers to rub at his chin as if trying to solve an extremely important mystery. You've been doing this job a lot longer than I have, so don't tell me assholes like that guy don't get to you. Most days I feel like strangling at least a few people. He raised his hand in the air and filled his fingers did with eyes that he was seriously fantasized about doing it for real. She remained quiet as he continued his triad. To top it off, where's this thing? He straightened his back, striking a cheesy pose, looking down at himself with a face filled with exaggerated disgust. Form-fitting, pink and green, cheap microfiber. Even I can't pull this shirt off. You have to be a goddamn psychopath to torture your employees like this. I promise if I ever find a job with better pay, I will cremate this monstrosity. She was still silent, so he turned to look at her. He found the sullen expression on her face. I'm sorry, Jeong. I guess I'm ranting again. This is just one of those days, you know? I feel like these people are slowly eating away at my soul, and sometimes this place will make me snap. I just wonder, how can you stay so at ease here? I never seen you lose your cool, or even so much as mention quitting, so consider a favor to your colleague and let me in on your secret. Do you have a stash of alcohol hidden in here somewhere? Maybe you're actually a service android. Wait, I know. Maybe you're one of those secret, super rich chaebols, and you have some kind of weird customer abuse fetish. And she was quiet for a while longer, but then she smiled at him. No, I'm not under the influence, and I'm not an heiress to a multinational corporation, although that would be nice, but in any case, I don't have a secret. I just smiled. She pointed at her lips, and her smile widened even more. He was quiet, but the blank stare on his face made it very apparent her response had been underwhelming. He finally let out a deflated sigh. Jeong, I know I've said this before, but honestly, there are times when you make me worry about you. He gestured at her face. That thing that you're doing with your face? Smiling? Yeah. To me, it looks more like the convenience store version of the 1,000-yard stare. Sure, the customers might buy it, but I'm not falling for it. His comment caught her off guard, and her smile wavered a bit. I'm not sure what you're getting at. To be honest, I don't mind working here. Actually, I sort of enjoy it. Joe stared at her with apprehension and pity written all over his face, but a few seconds later he shrugged his shoulders. Really? Well, I guess whatever floats your boat. Though, on the other hand, it's also possible that you've been working on the convenience store circuit a bit too long. Can't imagine the same person enjoying the... Her smile faded, and when he saw a sudden change in her, he stopped mid-sentence, leaned across the counter, and tried to make eye contact with her, but she kept staring at the floor. I didn't mean to imply you're nuts or anything. This job makes me crazy, and I feel like there's something wrong with people who can do this on a daily basis. Not that there's anything wrong with you. Digging your own grave, sir. You know me. In my mouth. I never know when to shut up. She smiled at him and laughed a little, wanting to downplay how much his words had accidentally hit home. It's fine. I'm not that sensitive, you know. Besides, I have to agree with you. Not hating this job is kind of weird. He smiled meekly and locked eyes with her, suddenly appearing uncharacteristically serious. Jeong, what I was really trying to say is that I hate this job in a multitude of ways, but seeing you every day makes it somewhat bearable. When I get out of bed, I actually look forward to my shift. Even though I only see you for a few minutes, you make me feel good. For a moment, the two of them stood there in awkward silence as the implied meaning of his words sunk in. Thanks, Joe. She scrambled to end the uncomfortable silence. Look at the time. I've really got to head home. She began to hurry towards the store exit, but he called out to her. Jeong? Yeah? What is it? His fingertips tapped against the counter surface, creating a nervous rhythm. So, I remember you telling me that you love action movies, and I was going to go see one tonight. I have an extra ticket, and it'd be waste to not use it. Again, silence filled the empty convenience store. Cho rubbed at the back of his neck and still glances at her. For a while, when it got obvious she was not getting the hint, he tried again. So, I just wanted to ask if you'd like to go to the movies with me. What should I say? I would like to go, but I'm not feeling well. Hell no. I think we could politely decline this. I don't think we're that rude, are we? I don't know. I'm gonna go not that rude. So I would like to go, but I'm not feeling well. I have a splitting headache, aching feet. You know, the usual workplace angst. Her gaze dropped to the store floor as she tried to think of a good answer. He's a good person, but I can't. Thanks for asking, Cho. I would like to go, but I'm not feeling well. Why do I feel so bad? It's not like I'm lying. I do feel sick. She had to stare at the floor as if the white linoleum was extremely fascinating. Cho was utterly unable to mask his disappointment, and the smile on his lips completely at odds with his frowning eyebrows. So it's like, okay, yeah, that would be really weird. Oh, it's totally fine. I thought you looked a little ill, so let's take a ring check on it. Anyway, be sure to get some rest tonight then. She nodded and quickly headed for the exit. Well, I'll see you tomorrow. Have a good night. He smiled and waved at her, and as she turned away from him, her smile began to flicker. Yeah. I'll see you later, Cho. The instant the store door closed behind her, all emotion drained from her face. That didn't sound very good. At least the last part. 24-hour love hotel. Bar and grill. I believe another hotel over there. A lot of ghosts going on around here. Her footsteps echoed in the dark and wet street. Like most days, a thick, smoggy mist hung in the air. It was raining hard, and her clothes were already getting drenched. She stared at her feet and kept walking forward slowly, paying no attention to the people passing by. She listened to the comforting, slow buzz of the neon signs scattered all over the walls and tall buildings surrounding the street. Cyan City never slept. It was an endless sea of bright lights, its air filled with the constant discord of sounds. Countless bars, clubs, restaurants, tea houses, arcades, host and hostess clubs, soaplands, and love hotels lined its streets. In essence, here people get whatever they want, whenever they want. She stopped momentarily in front of one of the soaplands and stared at a large, hollow display. Projected into the air within a glass box, she saw a scantily clad, blue-skinned woman with 3 plump breasts. Apparently humans have changed. The woman gripped a neon green lightsaber in her hand. A pasty, pudgy, middle-aged man was crouched in front of her, squealing as the plastic sword repeatedly hit his rear. It's an interesting image. Jeong sighed and rubbed her aching forehead. All those technological breakthroughs, and this is what we do with them? The Soplin's door opened and a huge AI bouncer stepped out to beckon her in, probably mistaking her for a potential customer. She shook her head at the hulking android and continued on her way. There were less people about than usual. It was too late for those living the 9-to-5 grind, and too early for the nocturnals. Due to the heavy particular smog, night and day were almost identically visual. Sunlight was extremely rare when the acidic rain was pretty much constant. Still, the human circadian rhythm and the need for societal order kept things running somewhat clockwork. Jeong didn't really have a preference. The time of day made no difference to her. She was in no hurry, so as she walked, she let her mind wander and occasionally stopped to massage her throbbing head some more. Maybe I should pick up some painkillers. What's the use, though? I've tried them all and it didn't help. Just made my stomach hurt, too. A slight wave of dizziness washed over her, and she felt like she was going to faint. As she abruptly stopped moving, a tall man bumped against her back. Ow! He glared at her and shoved her aside, quickly vanishing into the crowd. She rubbed her shoulder, feeling slightly annoyed, but she was too exhausted to curse him out. She inhaled sharply, and her limp hand fell to her side. Okay. For a moment, she was sure she was going to pass out and hit the asphalt face first. I'm so tired. I was feeling ill at the store, but it's getting worse and worse now. Waves of nausea washed over her, and the world around her began to shift. But it is. She leaned against a wall for support, her fingers tracing her flushed and rain-drenched cheek. I'm burning up. She felt unwell for months now. Headache, insomnia, chronic fatigue had been such a daily companions in her life that she was surprised to run into a new symptom. I guess I might have a fever. In an attempt to steady herself, she began to scan the street. Her vision was clouded, but she tried to focus on the blur of people flowing past her. It was easy to spot the tourists, with their glowing smiles and, more often than not, stimulant-induced excitement. They're like bright drops of color on a dark canvas. In contrast, most locals appeared spent, their eyes vacant, their expressions dulled by perpetual dejection. Many of the people she saw wore smog masks, and almost all of them donned an umbrella. She realized her own umbrella was in her locker back at Megamart. She considered going back for it, but decided against it when she imagined facing Cho again. I guess I'd rather get soaked than risk more social interaction with a friend. She was surrounded by people every day, but customers and strangers did not bother her. The problem was being around people who actually knew her. Cho was slowly peeling away her defenses layer by layer, and that made her extremely uncomfortable. She took a deep breath and swiped the droplets of water clean to her shoulders. Almost all the umbrellas she saw were black. Some other dark hue or completely translucent. When she spotted a neon umbrella bobbing amongst the crowd, her eyes fixed on it. Beneath the umbrella, she could see a boy and a girl huddled close together. The boy walked forward with a confident gait, holding the umbrella in one hand and clasping the girl's tiny palm with the other. Every now and then, they jumped over a crack in the concrete, seemingly trying to make the walk home more adventurous. As Jeong stared at them, for a moment her lips curled to a faint smile. They looked so cute. She could vividly remember walking down the same streets, her fingers in her locked in a warm hand. She felt so happy and safe then, no matter how uncertain and grim the circumstances might have been. Soon the small pair disappeared into a side alley, and Jeong's face went blank again. She shook herself to fully return back to the present. She lifted her hand to her front, her fingers digging into the folds of her jacket, trying to ease the suffocating feeling in her chest. I need to get home. Yep. After a couple of deep breaths, the dizziness finally began to subside. Her first few footsteps were shaky, but she managed to steady herself and quicken her pace. Now that she was getting closer to home, she could feel the dread inside her grow with each step. Wonder why she dreads it. Jeong arrived at the squalid apartment block. She made her way through a cramped corridor filled with trash and empty syringes. Quality home living. She kept walking past several doors. At one point, she had to squeeze against the corridor wall to get around two drunken vagrants. Cyan City was filled with people like them. People who initially came here because of the promise of endless pleasure and happiness, but stayed because they were too broken to leave. She sighed relief when neither of the men stirred. After a while, she reached her apartment door. Home, sweet home. She stood there for a long time just staring at the door, her muscles tense and her mouth dry. Get a hold of yourself. She took a keycard from her pocket and swiped it over the door control panel.
Login accepted.
Watching the door slowly open, her stomach dropped. She hesitated for a moment longer before walking through the dark doorway. The room was somber and in disarray. Its only source of light was a small computer monitor. She unzipped her jacket and let it drop. It hit the faded plastic tatami floor with a wet thud. She kicked off her soggy shoes. The rest of her clothes were also soaked through, but she didn't bother changing out of them. Instead, she walked over to her bed and slumped against it, sliding all the way down to the floor. For some time, she sat there, cradling her knees. The apartment was still. The only sound she heard was the constant hum of the air conditioner, the busy city, and the rainfall separated from her by the thick safety glass window. She stared at her wet socks. One of them had a hole through which the tip of her big toe was peeking out. For some reason, looking out at the worn sock made her hurt a bit more, and she averted her eyes, choosing instead to scrutinize the rest of her surroundings. She regarded the small pile of clothes stacked in the corner of the room with distaste. She wasn't a slob, but lately she had trouble getting things done. This was evidenced by the overall squalor of the apartment, the empty packages of instant food filling the kitchenette, the fine dust covering all the apartment surfaces, the clogged bathroom sink, and the stained tatami floor. All of it screamed neglect. Her water heater had broken down a month ago, but she made do with the cold water. She hadn't cooked a proper meal in months, and some of her clothes began to feel too loose on her shrinking frame. Skinny shrinking frame. There you go. She ran her eyes over the small computer monitor. She hadn't touched it for some time, probably not since she had to pawn most of her more expensive tech equipment. Sometimes she missed her VR stuff, but she had to make rent somehow, and her job at Megamart wasn't enough to cover it. She considered using her desktop to access one of the Cyan City chat servers, but they were heavily moderated as well and filled with bots and worse. She kept sitting on the floor trying not to think, but after a few minutes the room began to feel stifling. The floor next to her was strewn with photographs. She tried her best to avoid looking at them, but her eyes were slowly drawn to a single glass-encased photo. She picked it up and stared at the image of a happy family frozen in time, cheerful and loving parents holding a boy and a girl almost identical in appearance. She could still remember bits and pieces of that day. Her mother kissing her cotton candy-coated cheek, her father carrying her on top of his wide shoulders, and her brother holding her hand as they rode the carousel together. I can't believe they're all gone. She uncradled the image to her chest and squeezed her eyes shut. She managed to suppress the tears, but her breathing became shaky. She let the image fall to the floor. She picked up another photo. Two happy faces stared back at her. At first they looked the same, but on further inspection, beneath the surface, they were complete opposites. One shy, trying to fade into the background, the other widely confident and unruly. The picture made her heart ache. You're the only thing I had left, Xion. Her fingertips slid across the photo, tracing the shape of his face. We were doing fine. Just the two of us. I felt everything was going to turn out okay. We were going to leave this place and start a new life, but now you're gone. She saw the night she found out her brother had died in a car accident. The moment had been so incredibly brief, but every single detail was etched into her memory. The acrid smell of the detective's aftershave, the cacophony of the scanner radios, and the confused looks on the faces gaping at her as her legs gave out. Keeps replaying in my head. They picked me up from the floor, dragged me to a side office, and showed me pictures. Awful pictures. I could only recognize your hair and your clothes. Everything else was broken. Jeong tried to shake the sickening image from her head. She pressed a hand against her aching chest. I wish I could stop thinking about it. She stared at the bed across from her. It's been empty for 96 days. There was a folded jacket lying on top of the bed. You always wore this that night. You left it behind. She reached over and grabbed the jacket, burying her face in the soft fabric, inhaling deeply. The sweet infusion of black coffee, vanilla shampoo, and cigarette smoke filled her nose. I can still smell your scent. It keeps getting fainter every day. She took in shredded breaths. She held onto the fabric so tightly, her knuckles turned white. This isn't the only thing I have left of you. She shook her head and touched her face tentatively with the palm of her hand. This just makes it worse. Every time I look in the mirror, it comes back to me. A constant reminder that you're gone and I'm still here. It's also becoming painfully obvious how useless I am without you. You're always trying to break me out of my shell, force me into the world outside. In these months, I've managed to degenerate into a crazed hermit, distancing myself from everything, everyone. I shut them all out. It feels like I'm living the same day over and over. I can smile on the outside, but inside, it's like there's nothing there. I'm like an empty shell. At first, she had welcomed the numbness. It had slowly replaced her shattering grief, lulling her into a silent calm. However, after a few weeks and then a few months, she grew fully aware that the silent calm was not an oasis you could momentarily visit to escape your sorrows. It was a black hole that would eventually swallow you whole. Sometimes I get so tired I forget who I am, where I am. Those moments of confusion are my escape. Or for a while, I get to pretend none of this is real. I should be glad I can still function enough to work. There I can keep my mind occupied here in this makeshift tomb. I keep moving in useless little circles, spiraling downward fast. I'm not sure how much longer I can keep going like this. I can't sleep. I can't eat. For a moment, her vision doubled again, and the dull ache in her head intensified. She tried to massage her forehead, but it did nothing. I doubt this endless pity party is doing me any favors. Maybe I just need to pull myself up by my bootstraps. Maybe if I hold on for a little longer, it'll get easier. I love what happened earlier with Joe. I've tried to do this on my own, but it's not working. Sion did always try and tear me away from my digital distractions. He told me countless times that people can't survive alone. She got up on her knees and moved across the floor to dig through her jacket pocket. She pulled a smartphone and quickly searched through her short contact list. She stared at Cho's name and number. Her breath stopped as her fingers hovered over the send button. What should I do? Call him. Don't call him. I say calm. She needs help, I think. He can't face it alone. She hesitated for a moment longer and then pressed the button. She listened to the dial tone, trying to figure out what to tell him. I wonder if this is a mistake. What do I want to say to him anyway? The dial tone continued to sound and she felt her throat constrict. I shouldn't be doing this. Her thoughts scattered as she heard the call connect with a click. She inhaled, preparing to speak, but the second she heard Cho's voice, she was flooded with terror. She tried to speak, but she couldn't think. She closed her eyes, trying to clear her thoughts, as if the thing inside her she feared the most was rushing to the surface. When she opened her eyes, it burst free. Well then. For an instant, she could clearly see her brother. His disfigured face was covered with curls of dirty hair and congealed splatters of blood. His empty eyes, seeing nothing. Before she could stop herself, she screamed and hurled the smartphone across the room. The device smashed against the wall, its glass shattering into pieces. She stared at the broken remains, wringing her shaking hands against her knees. Her breath hitched in her throat, and she felt the last glimmer of hope inside her die. She was overwhelmed by feelings of despair and self-hatred. Before, in the midst of her darkest moments, she had heard a malicious whisper inside her. Now that whisper had amplified into a piercing scream. It's all your fault. Every person you let get close to you ends up dead. If you can't fix yourself, you should do everyone a favor and just disappear. She stood up slowly and leaned back to pick up Seong's jacket. She slipped the jacket on and pulled the zipper up. Her hands were shaking so badly, she had trouble closing all the jacket's buttons. She slipped on her wet shoes and turned to look back out at the empty apartment. This place is filled with so many memories. But now I just can't stand it anymore. She opened the door and left the apartment. She'd been walking the city street for hours, not really seeing anyone or anything. The world around her blurred and illusion. She kept walking forward, trying to get her mind under control, but her fever was worsening and her thoughts were a chaotic mess. I can't go back there, I can't. I'll just keep walking until I feel better, or until She was startled when a car honked loudly right in front of her, the abrupt sound dragging her out of the haze. Haze become. Bright headlights were pointing right at her. She looked around, still in a stupor. She was standing in the middle, busy highway. How did I get here? Several cars were stuck, waiting for her to move out of the way. Through the blaring car horns, she heard someone scream profanities, most likely directed at her. She hurried away from the road, but just as she reached the sidewalk, she tripped and fell to the concrete. She didn't bother getting up right away. People hurried past her, some only pausing to give her a frightened or disapproving glance. She let out an unhinged chuckle and slowly dragged herself to her feet. She began to pat the dirt off her knees, but suddenly stopped. Her eyes wide and her breath caught in her throat. In the distance, she could see the Cyan Bridge, the huge, mist-covered structure laid across the Jeong Moon, its massive metallic pillars struding out the water. Her heartbeat accelerated and she felt a frantic exhilaration fill her. Jeong took a few steps forward as she stared at the familiar sight. She kept standing in the rain for a long time, her body motionless, but inside her, a war was being waged between two opposing sides. One part of her willing to fight on, another part of her ready to throw in the towel. A moment later, she exhaled deeply, and her hesitation and resistance faded. Her mind was made up. I can't go home anymore, so I will come to you. She started walking towards the Cyan Bridge. After several hours of walking through the rain, she finally reached the bridge. Her legs were shaky and she felt lighthearted, but she kept walking towards the center of the bridge. On her way, she passed glowing panels attached to the bridge railing. The panels contained images and messages directed at people like her, but she didn't even notice them. Finally, she reached her destination and walked right next to the bridge railing. Some cars were driving past her, but there were no pedestrians in sight. She rested her arms on the railing, and for a while she just looked at the view. From here, one could see almost all of Cyan City, with soaring skyscrapers, the black Jeong River, and the hundreds of sprawling cities' streets. All of it bathed in a neon hue of lights and particulates. I never thought the city looked beautiful. All I see is concrete, smog, filth. You saw something different. I don't still know what that was. For a moment, the view took her back to another time, and she smiled. We used to come here all the time. We look at the river and the city lights, drink beer and talk for hours, dreaming about a perfect future. They really did look alike, though. Obviously, this is her. It's like, it might be hard, but totally dressed right there. And then there's the brother. Would go far away from this place. You would run your own bar with a selection of imported liquors and specialty coffees, and you would find a nice wife and have kids, and I would start my tech repair shop and get lost in the VR stream. Happily ever after. A cold gust of wind hit her face, turning her smile into a pang of grimace. I don't care about any of that stuff now. I just wish I could go back in time. She wrapped her arms around her shoulders and held on tight. She tried to envision his face, his smile, but her memories were too corrupted. His features were overwritten by that one final gruesome image. I want to hug you and never let go. She grabbed a hold of the bridge railing and pulled herself up. I can't go back. I can't face going forward alone. She stood at the top of the railing, her body shivering as she stared into the dark water below. I hate water. It's probably going to be freezing cold. The last fragment of her rational self was screaming at her to climb back down and try to reason with her, trying to postpone the inevitable. If I wait another day, what will change? Nothing. This feeling's not going to go away. If I leave, who will miss me? No one. I'm not hurting anyone. I just want to stop feeling this. She was exhausted and ill, both mentally and physically. It was so easy to ignore the small voice inside her head, the voice pleading with her to stop. She stared at the tip of her shoe as she moved her foot forward, sliding across the her heel rested on the rusted metal, while the rest of her foot was suspended over nothing. For the first time in a long time, in that moment she felt she had control, or at least a hope that finally her pain would cease. The sounds of the city faded, and the feel of the wind and rain on her skin numbed. I'm sorry, Jeong. I no longer want to be here. I no longer need to be here. She hardly registered the sound of a car shrieking to a halt somewhere close by. She closed her eyes and exhaled deeply. I can't wait to see you again. She relaxed all of her muscles and her body began to tilt forward. Jeong! She heard someone shout. A second later, her body was violently ripped backwards. Her lungs emptied as she hit the asphalt with brutal force. She coughed to open her eyes, but she was blinded by bright car headlights. When her vision adjusted, she looked up to see two men staring down at her. Jeong was disoriented and confused. She blinked wildly, tried to focus. One of the men was huge, kept glaring at her menacingly. Blonde, crudely chopped hair framed his pale face. He had dark circles under his eyes and a deep scar ran across his right cheek. He had no eyebrows, and his skin seemed poreless and taut, stretching thinly across his sharp cheekbones. The other man had spiky red hair. He was small and seemed calm compared to the blonde, but he was riddled with jagged scars. Both men wore black-tipped suits. You little shit! Did you think you could take our money and live? What is he talking about? Jeong struggled to think, but the fever and her state of mind made it difficult. What should I say? What the fuck do you want? Please let me go. That's two good choices. Just interrupted what I was trying to do. I don't know. I mean, you can snap in anger, yeah. What the fuck do you want? A sudden shock and pain made her unable to think. As adrenaline rushed through her veins, she opened her mouth to scream at them. What the fuck do you want? The bigger man smiled at her first, then bared his teeth and sneered. When she moved to get up, he grabbed her by her jacket collar and dangled her in the air. What the fuck do I want? His face was inches from her, so close she could smell whiskey on his breath. She tried to pry his arm away, but it wouldn't budge. The arm holding her solid muscle, and her clawed fingers achieved nothing. He just smiled more and laughed. Is that all you got? Pathetic. Let me go, asshole! Her jacket collar dug into her neck. She attempted to wiggle free. Still suspended in air, she kicked and clawed at him, but he seemed completely unaffected, even when her foot connected hard against his thigh. Let me... Before she could say more, he slammed her to the ground. Ugh. Her lungs emptied and she felt a burst of pain in her side. Various kicks began to rain down on her. The big man breathed heavily, his cheek tinted red from exertion. Maybe, just maybe, we want our money back, you backstabbing piece of shit. She didn't really hear his words. She could only concentrate on the pain rippling all over her body. Another volley of kicks landed on her, agonizing blows hitting her stomach and ribs. Stop! The man chuckled at her, pleading. Enough with the weak-ass acting, Jeong. I will enjoy kicking a fucking head off. He continued the brutal attack, kicking her again and again. Jeong cut her lip in a fetal position on the ground, her hands instinctively trying to protect her head. Why does he keep calling me Jeong? The smaller man walked over to the railing and took in the scenery for a moment. He nonchalantly dug a cigarette out of his jacket pocket, lit it, and took a long, relaxed drag. Fang, would you mind hurrying up? My suit's getting wet. His request was ignored by the blonde, who kept kicking the small whimpering lump off the ground. Great. I'll have a decent smoke in this downpour. He threw a soggy, now unlit cigarette over the railing, rail, and turned to look at Jeong. She was no longer attempting to protect herself, just lying there limply taking the blows as they came. One of the more vicious kicks hit her straight in the diaphragm, making it difficult to breathe. She managed a few more wheezes, but her vision began to blur. This is... She stared at the bright car headlights in front of her until everything went black. She could still hear the rain and the wet thuds of his boots hitting her body, but she couldn't see or feel anything. The large blonde kicked her a few more times until he was shoved away by the smaller man. Finn, that's enough. The larger man growled in frustration, but he let Jeong be. The other man crouched down to take a closer look. His fingers seemed pushed away green strands of hair and stared at the ghostly pale wet skin beneath. He's unsure. Still figured was breathing. Fuck's sake, Fang! You want to see him alive! The man breathed regularly, trying to calm himself. Yeah, I know it. But don't get your panties in a bunch. Strong arms wrapped around her body, and she was lifted up. She felt cold air brushing against her wet skin as she was carried. The feeling of weightlessness ended abruptly when she was flung to the back seat of the car. She landed on her stomach, her arms pulled up behind her back, and she inhaled sharply when something cut into her wrists. Finally, she could no longer fight the pool of unconsciousness, and she allowed herself to sleep. The car engine revved, and they sped off into the night. I think that's a good place as any to wrap it up. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and definitely make sure to check out the game page and think of helping support the creator of this wonderful visual novel. We'll have another chapter up as soon as I can make it. I hope to see you guys again soon. Until then, bye. Count out. Have a good one, guys.